Hi, welcome to Read, Think, Act at Lighthouse. Today we'll be talking to Yara Rodrigues Fowler, author of The Stubborn Archivist and her latest novel, which is called There Are More Things.
That's a really good question. So a big part of the dynamic is not only what language I'm writing in, but what language and what place people are kind of reading from and reading in. So as much as I might love to write for a truly international audience, like the reality of the book market is that I've written a book that's in English, it's published by a British publisher and will be made available to Anglophone readers. So that's our starting point. And so when I write in Portuguese, I guess a little bit of what I'm doing is, and sometimes I translate and sometimes I don't. And so when I don't translate, or even if I translate like 3 pages later, so you're left waiting and you're not sure, I'm trying to introduce, I guess, like flipping that dynamic so that it's the Anglophone readers that feel disorientated or like they don't have access to the information because of language, which is something obviously that migrants feel all the time in Britain. So there's a little bit of just flipping it and giving them a feel for that kind of experience. And then the other thing I want to do is, and I guess part of that is introducing the idea that the text is rooted in the real world. So the text doesn't exist in this kind of like magical fantasy box that you enter and exit when you're reading, which is like sometimes how we think about reading. Instead, the book is something that has roots in the real world, and whether that means that you are moving from the book to Google Translate, or whether you are like moving from the book and also reading the book and playing music out loud that's playing in the book, and then you move your body and you become aware of your body in space. My aim is kind of to root the book in the real world, and in the real world dynamics between Brazilian migrants in the UK, like Anglophone speakers in the world, and all of that. I think probably the most useful way of thinking about the category woman that I've heard comes from Lola Olufemi in Feminism Interrupted. And I might be misquoting her, but I think she talks about it as kind of an umbrella term that we're putting all these different experiences under. And we know that's the case, right? Like being a woman in the UK is really different to being a woman in Brazil, and class and race, disability, age, like all these different things mean that there's all these different experiences and different ways of being embodied that sit under this category woman. So for me, I suppose that category's there. Sometimes it's really useful, but being exclusive about it, I don't find useful. So I don't think there are many people who are who experience patriarchal violence who aren't women, or even experience misogynist patriarchal violence because the world thinks that they're women or perceives them as women who aren't women. So a lot of non-binary people and certain trans men as well, for example, like if you have a uterus and you can't get an abortion. So for that reason, I think for me, it's really useful to have as expansive and inclusive a definition of sisterhood. Essentially, anyone who wants to be included in it should be there, because that's how we experience violence at the end of the day. And unless we take care of each other, no one else is going to. I know that a lot of people are a bit scared of doing that. They're really scared of having a looser grip on what they think a woman is, for example. And I know that sometimes that comes from a place of trauma. And what I would say to that is, I really would invite you to imagine a world where we're not fighting for scraps, where we're not being like, oh, there's only, who gets to be in a women's prison or who gets access to a women's shelter. Like, instead of having that like extremely depressing conversation, instead we're being like, how do we build a world where like no one is in prison, like no women are in prison, no one is in prison, there's abundant refuges for everyone, but also we're like protecting these people from violence in the first place, and we're abolishing that violence. So yeah, that is what I would think of and how I approach sisterhood. Yeah. So I think the kind of like maybe slightly more lower hanging fruit is to stay informed and educated as much as possible. So if you speak English, then Brazil Wire is really good to keep you updated about that kind of thing. And one of my favorite journalists is Nicole Froio, and she writes in English and Portuguese. She's wicked. And she's really good on like abolitionist feminism and that kind of thing. And then if you speak Portuguese, then there's Mídia Ninja, who are really cool and been going for a long time. And then there's Mídia Índia Oficial, which is an indigenous sort of a similar type thing. So I think like that's really useful just to know what's going on. But beyond that, I think the kind of way I would look at it, and that I think is probably the most productive in terms of solidarity, is thinking like, okay, if you're a person in the global north, what particular leverage do I have that I can use to like stop violence happening in the global south? So for example, are there things that your government is doing? Are there financial institutions and companies that are based in the global north that you could do a direct action against in solidarity with a group in the global south? And I think that is where it gets really interesting and powerful. And also, for example, just like having a feminism that is like rooted in and as like has the fundamental principle of international solidarity and being anti-borders and so on, anti-deportation, that should be built into anything you do. Like not ever making the mistake of thinking you're the only country in the world, or that the problems you're fighting can be fixed within the borders of where you are.